Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we are embarking on a truly fascinating journey. We hear about massive hacks and data breaches all the time, right? But today, we're flipping the script. We aren't just looking at the computer code. We're going to uncover the hidden psychology behind the world's most notorious cybercrimes, taking a deep dive into the human beings actually writing that code.
It's a pretty wild question when you stop and think about it. What actually drives a person to hack the Pentagon, practically shut down the early internet, or systematically steal 170 million credit card numbers? To really understand these massive digital heists, we have to look way beyond the firewalls and the encryption. We're going to profile the human minds responsible for these acts, exploring the psychological traits, the behavioral patterns, and the deep-seated motivations that push cybercriminals to do what they do.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the mind behind the keyboard.
So to understand these invisible threats lurking online, experts rely heavily on cyber profiling. And one of the foundational concepts you've got to know here is online disinhibition. Basically, it's this psychological phenomenon where the anonymity of the internet totally lowers our normal behavioral inhibitions. Think about it. A computer screen acts like a psychological invisibility cloak. It completely removes societal norms and that face-to-face accountability we have in the real world. This allows highly intelligent individuals to completely detach from the real-world devastation caused by their keystrokes. It encourages extreme risk-taking and socially deviant conduct that, honestly, these folks would probably never even attempt in the physical world.
Okay, let's dive into this and quickly categorize the players here so we're all on the same page. You've got white hat hackers. Those are the good guys doing ethical testing to improve security. Then you have black hat hackers, which are your malicious criminals exploiting systems for personal gain. And sitting right in the middle are the gray hats, who often expose security flaws without authorization, but usually not for malicious reasons. Today, though, we are focusing squarely on the psychology of the black hats.
Moving right along to Section 2, driven by pure curiosity. We usually assume it's all about the money, right? But early cybercrime was often driven by sheer curiosity. Just a brilliant mind asking, hey, can I break this? Look at this prime example from back in 1988. A Cornell grad student named Robert Tappan Morris wrote a self-replicating computer worm. His motivation? He literally just told a friend he wanted to see if it could be done. He released it from the MIT network to try and cover his tracks. But he made a crucial coding error. The worm was programmed to copy itself 14% of the time, no matter if a computer was already infected or not. Within just 15 hours, thousands of early internet computers were infected and rendered completely useless. It caused up to $10 million in damages. This purely intellectual exercise resulted in the very first felony conviction under the U.S. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
And actually, academic research confirms that this type of curiosity-driven cybercrime is incredibly common. It usually stems from an individual possessing exceptionally high cognitive ability and creativity, combined with, quite frankly, a dangerous lack of foresight regarding the real-world consequences of what they're doing. They see the network as a giant abstract puzzle, entirely disconnected from the actual human beings who rely on it.
Which brings us to the incredible, but honestly deeply tragic case of Jonathan James. Operating under the alias Comrade, get this, at just 15 years old, his intellectual curiosity rapidly escalated from probing local school networks to straight-up hacking into the United States Department of Defense. He installed a backdoor, intercepted over 3,000 highly sensitive government messages, and if that wasn't enough, he even stole the source code that controlled the temperature and humidity life support systems for NASA's International Space Station. A 15-year-old, no way, right?
Well, James was eventually caught, becoming the first juvenile incarcerated for cybercrime in the U.S. But the psychological toll of this hidden world is just immense. Years later, he was investigated by the Secret Service for a massive retail hack that he adamantly denied having any part in. Terrified of being prosecuted for crimes he felt he didn't commit, James tragically took his own life at age 24. His suicide note read in part, "I have no faith in the justice system. Either way, I have lost control over this situation, and this is my only way to regain control." It's a really sobering reminder of the intense, real-world psychological stakes involved in these digital investigations.
Okay, on to Section 3, the lure of financial gain.
170 million. I want you to just let that staggering number sink in for a second. That represents the estimated number of stolen credit and ATM card numbers masterminded by one single guy, Albert Gonzalez, between 2005 and 2007. It's recognized as the biggest fraud of its kind in history. Operating under the alias Soup Nazi, Gonzalez masterminded the Shadow Crew hacking group and executed these massive data breaches against giant retailers. Driven by pure, unchecked greed, his lifestyle was absolutely wild. I mean, he threw himself a $75,000 birthday party. He even famously complained about having to count $340,000 by hand just because his automatic currency counting machine broke. But here is the absolute kicker when you look at Gonzalez's psychological profile, the sheer audacity of the guy. After an initial arrest, he became a paid informant for the Secret Service, helping them indict other hackers, while simultaneously continuing to orchestrate his massive 170 million card heist in total secret. You literally can't make this stuff up.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the social engineer.
So as networks got more and more secure, hackers realized something pretty fundamental. The easiest target isn't the software, it's the human sitting in front of the machine. And this brilliantly illustrates social engineering. It's when criminals exploit human psychology, our basic trust, and our natural desire to be helpful, using manipulation to bypass all those expensive technological security systems. I mean, you don't need to spend hours breaking a firewall if you can just convince an employee to read you their password over the phone, right?
Enter Kevin Mitnick, famously known as the Condor. No one mastered this dark art better than him. Mitnick's notorious career started by stealing computer manuals from Pacific Bell when he was just 17. He allegedly hacked NORAD in 1982 and stole software from the Digital Equipment Corporation. When the FBI finally came looking, he became a ghost, a fugitive for 2.5 years, using cloned cellular phones to constantly hide his location. Mitnick wasn't just a technical genius. His primary weapon wasn't even code, it was social manipulation. Driven largely by the thrill of the chase, he routinely tricked telecom employees into just handing over direct access to their networks.
Mitnick's story has this fascinating psychological arc to it. During his imprisonment, law enforcement was actually so terrified of his capabilities that a judge allegedly threw him in solitary confinement for 8 months. Why? Because they literally feared he could somehow start a nuclear war just by whistling modem tones into a prison payphone. But look at the incredible irony of his second act. After his release in 2000, Mitnick flipped his script. He utilized his deep, first-hand understanding of hacker psychology to become a highly successful white-hat security consultant. He eventually became the chief hacking officer at a major firm, literally teaching companies how to defend against the very social engineering tactics that he helped pioneer. Talk about a 180.
Now let's get into Section 5, the psychological dark side.
We've talked about curiosity, and we've talked about greed, but academic research points to some much darker traits that allow certain cybercriminals to act without a single ounce of remorse. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly these 3 specific personality disorders, collectively known as the dark triad, map right onto cybercrime. You have narcissism, where hackers are just seeking extreme notoriety, feeling totally superior to the quote-unquote stupid security systems they break. Then you have Machiavellianism, which is the masterful, cold calculation and manipulation of systems and people, exactly like we just saw with social engineering. And finally, psychopathy. This translates to a chilling lack of empathy. Because the victims are just faceless numbers on a screen, the hacker feels absolutely zero guilt about wiping out someone's entire life savings.
Academic models also point heavily to this fascinating, though sad, dynamic between social isolation and digital validation. Think about it. You've got many chronic cyber offenders who experience extreme real-world detachment and deep physical loneliness. They lack traditional social bonds. So to cope, these brilliant minds turn to hidden, underground online communities. And in those spaces, hacking isn't a crime, it's a currency. Successfully pulling off a massive breach grants them the status, the peer approval, and the feelings of immense power that they completely lack in their everyday physical lives.
Finally, Section 6. Profiling to prevent cybercrime.
So, what does all this mean? How does understanding these dark minds actually help us? Well, today, cybersecurity experts are using this exact profiling to actively hunt threats and prevent attacks. They use digital forensics to narrow down suspects based on super unique keystroke behaviors or the specific timing of attacks. They use linguistic profiling to analyze the text in a phishing email, or even the hidden notes left within the code, to figure out the attacker's emotional state and background. And now, of course, machine learning and AI are being trained on these massive behavioral datasets to predict and stop hackers before they even strike. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the very first line of defense is just cyber hygiene education, training everyday users like us to recognize the psychological manipulation of social engineering.
And that really brings us full circle. We've profiled the brilliant, the curious, the greedy, and sometimes the very dark minds hiding behind the keyboard.
But the internet is a shared space we all live in, and the biggest vulnerability in any network isn't the software, it's human psychology. So, with unseen minds constantly probing the internet, exploiting trust, and searching for the slightest weakness, I want to leave you with this question. Is your digital footprint inviting the next cybercriminal? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay safe out there and keep questioning everything.